Okay, let's unpack this. We're just to deep dives into data, into, complex history, emerging tech. But today we are diving deep into philosophy. And it's ancient wisdom that is so radical, so uh, countercultural, that it's actually shockingly relevant to our lives right now, to this relentless, endless external hustle.
It is a radical concept. It really
Yeah.
is. Because it just challenges everything we assume about modern success. We're starting today with this really uncompromising statement from Diogenes Laertius. And it's the foundation for, well, for every source we've gathered today. He said, "Make wisdom your provision for the journey from youth to old age, for it is far more certain support than all other possessions."
That one statement, it's the cornerstone of this whole deep dive. And it's a direct challenge, I think, to you listening right now. I mean, we live in a world that is absolutely obsessed with accumulating external markers of security.
Oh, completely. Net worth, stock portfolios.
Real estate, job titles, followers, influence, you name it. We spend, 40 years building these massive external security systems around ourselves? But the core argument of these ancient sources is that those things are, and this is the paradox, the most unreliable form of support we could possibly have.
Precisely. They're precarious. They're subject to theft and economic collapse.
Political shifts, social whims.
Right. And most importantly, they're fundamentally outside of your control. So if we accept the premise that life is a journey from youth to old age, then a really practical question is, what do you pack? What do you pack for a journey that you know is going to be long and unpredictable? And our mission today is to shift that perspective completely, away from external security to establishing what the sources call internal sovereignty.
And internal sovereignty, I like that. So we want to find the aha moments.
Yes, the concrete daily practices that show you exactly how to begin packing this essential, this unstealable provision of wisdom. And you can start right now, regardless of what your bank account looks like.
That's a powerful reframing. Okay, so let's jump straight into section one. We need to analyze why our default setting, this accumulation of external stuff, is so inherently unstable, and why that instability forces us to look inward instead.
And, the Stoic philosophers, particularly Epictetus, were just masters at this, at diagnosing the true source of human agitation and, well, fear. He offers this precise and honestly a chilling warning about where we place our energy, where we think we have control. He states it plainly. He says that if you seek tranquility by controlling external events or other people,
Which is, let's be honest, the definition of chasing wealth and status.
it is. He says if you do that, you will then be agitated, fearful, and unstable. It's a guarantee.
And that is the core paradox we are addicted to, isn't it? We pursue these external props because we desperately want to feel secure. But the very act of depending on them makes us, exponentially more vulnerable.
Exactly. More agitated, more fearful, more unstable. It's a guaranteed loop of suffering.
So can you break that down? What's the psychological mechanism there? Why does aiming for external control immediately destabilize us?
Because control is, it's a zero-sum game when you apply it externally.
Yeah.
Epictetus forces us to look at what he called the dichotomy of control. There are things up to us and things not up to us. It's that simple.
Okay, so what's in our control?
Our opinions, our choices, our desires, our aversions, basically our inner world. What's not up to us? Well, pretty much everything else. Our bodies, our possessions, our reputation, and definitely the actions of other people.
Right. So the moment your sense of peace or your definition of success depends on one of those uncontrollable things.
You've lost. You have intentionally placed your tranquility outside your own perimeter. Think about it. If your mood for the day depends on how a difficult colleague behaves, or how the market performs, or
Or how many likes you get on a post.
yes, you've given away your power, you've guaranteed you will be agitated.
I see. So if I'm constantly doom scrolling the news, obsessing over a potential recession, or, checking my investment apps every hour, I am actively choosing a path that Epictetus promises will lead to agitation and instability.
You are. You're sacrificing the certainty of the internal for the illusion of the external. And the philosopher clarifies this. He says, if you shift your focus to your own reasoned choices, the things you can control, you gain the will to avoid real suffering. But the moment you shift that caution away from your choices to things controlled by others, you're done. You become instantly agitated.
And your problems just follow you.
They follow you wherever you go, running to a new country or getting a new job. None of that solves the core issue if you haven't mastered your own mind.
That clarifies the why so well, which leads us directly to the crucial first step the sources lay out for fixing this. Establishing self-leadership. I think this is so important. It's not about leading a company or dominating an industry. It's an internal conquest. a mastery of the self.
And that internal mastery is the definition of inner sovereignty. It's recognizing that before you can attract or achieve or manifest anything in the outside world, you first have to be in charge of your own mind, your own choices. If you can't lead yourself, you will just be led by circumstances.
That reminds me of the Plato quote.
It's perfect. Plato nailed this millennia ago. He said unequivocally that the first and best victory is to conquer self.
So that makes internal victory a prerequisite, a necessary prerequisite. If you don't conquer yourself, then your environment, your circumstances, or other people, they will conquer you.
They will.
But here's the challenge, and I think this is where a lot of people, especially in today's performance culture, get stuck. Isn't some external ambition necessary, for motivation? How do we balance this total requirement for inner sovereignty with, the need to get things done in the world?
That's a fundamental question. And the philosophical answer is it's about priorities. External achievement, if it happens, should be the byproduct of inner sovereignty, never the goal itself.
A byproduct, not the target.
Right. If you prioritize building an unshakable character, the external success you're looking for will often follow as a natural consequence. It comes from sound judgment and ethical action. But if you prioritize the external success first, the money, the title, you risk compromising the very character you need to sustain it. And that's when you get that promised agitation and fear.
And this brings us to probably one of the most powerful and kind of counterintuitive examples the sources give us. The Roman Emperor, Marcus Aurelius. He's the ultimate case study in someone who had all the external stuff, yet actively chose the internal as his real provision.
He really represents the vanity of external provision. I mean, here's a man who had unimaginable wealth, total military power, the highest political authority on earth. He had a level of external security that no one today could even dream of, and yet his own writings, the Meditations, they just confirmed that he knew none of that was his true provision.
It was all internal.
All of it. Rooted in philosophy, which for him was a daily practice, not some historical curiosity.
And the detail about his lifelong commitment to this is so striking. You mentioned that anecdote that even when he was an old man, he was spotted heading out to study with the philosopher Sextus.
Yes. And when someone asked him why, he's the emperor, the ultimate authority figure, he replied, "It is good even for an old man to learn. I am now on my way to learn what I do not yet know."
Wow.
Think about the depth of humility that requires. Marcus Aurelius wasn't just a powerful ruler. He was considered a living deity by some. He could have summoned any expert in the world to his palace, but he chose to walk to the home of his teacher, to submit himself to instruction.
So what does that prove?
It proves that for the most powerful person in the known world, his most certain, his most non-negotiable support wasn't his legions, it wasn't his imperial treasury or the entire Roman Empire. It was the commitment to the ongoing, daily, humble process of cultivating wisdom.
That scene just completely reframes the whole concept of provision for me. If the greatest provision were external, Marcus would have had more than enough. He could have just retired from learning. But by continuing to learn, he was actively showing that knowledge, that philosophical insight, is a provision you have to keep replenishing.
Exactly. It shows that wisdom isn't a title you get. It's a resource you have to constantly pack. And so if someone with everything, ultimate power, security, prestige, still prioritized learning what he didn't know, what does that tell us about the foundational value we should place on our own self-cultivation?
The message is crystal clear.
For you listening, who probably faces way more daily uncertainty than a Roman emperor, the message is that the provision of wisdom is non-negotiable, and it is a task that is never, ever finished.
It underscores the mission perfectly. Wisdom isn't a finish line. It's the provision you have to keep packing. Which brings us to the mechanics of it, the practice itself. Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. We're moving from the why to the how. If wisdom isn't status, if it isn't something you're born with, and if you have to acquire it, then how? How do we actually get it? And the sources are very clear on this. It's acquired through rigorous, sustained, repeatable effort. It's not given. It must be earned.
It's so crucial we get rid of this modern myth of the born sage or the instant guru. Marcus Aurelius wasn't born wise. His birth name was Marcus Catilius Severus Annius Verus. He was born to privilege, yes, but privilege doesn't just hand you wisdom. He had to work at it.
And the example of Epictetus is even more dramatic.
Oh, absolutely. He was born into slavery. He endured immense hardship. And through sheer, sustained internal effort, the constant application of philosophy, he transformed himself from a lowly slave to this powerful, influential philosopher who shapes the minds of emperors. These are examples of profound self-transformation achieved through disciplined practice, not luck, not inheritance.
And that transformation relies entirely on the mechanics of practice, or what the 20th century philosopher Pierre Hadot called spiritual exercising. He argued so convincingly that philosophy isn't something you're just taught in a class and then you passively possess it. It is, as he put it, a thing you do. It's an active way of life.
And we have to look at the roots of that idea. The Greek word for practice is askosis. It means training, exercise, or discipline. It's where we get the word asceticism, though that has kind of harsher connotations now. For the ancients, philosophical practice was literally spiritual exercising, training the muscles of the mind and character, just like an athlete trains their body.
Okay, so if philosophy is a thing we do, what are the specific reps? What are the exercises that build up this provision of wisdom? Because just saying read and journal is a little too generic for a deep dive. We need the technical application.
The sources, especially the Stoics, provide highly specific practices. They are exercises for the soul, designed to reprogram our harmful judgments. So first, there's the premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils.
Sounds intense.
It is, but it's practical. It's the practice of spending time, maybe in the morning, vividly imagining the setbacks that could happen today. Loss of possessions, an insult, illness, betrayal. You're not wishing for these things to happen. You're mentally preparing your philosophical provision for when turbulence inevitably hits. And doing that consistently, it preemptively stabilizes you against shock.
So you're building calluses on your mind.
That's a great way to put it. And second, there's the evening review. This is the practical journaling rep. Seneca advised reviewing your day. Ask yourself, what errors did I make? Was I impatient? Was I lazy? What habit did I break? This is how you identify the faulty programming, the false judgments that need correction tomorrow.
That makes the reps so much more strategic than just generic reflection. It's an iterative process. You're constantly identifying failures and refining your approach for the next day, which connects right back to the importance of iteration in mastering anything, doesn't it?
It does. The source material brings up this idea that the essence of writing is rewriting. And mastery of wisdom, just like mastering a novel, it requires immense diligence. It requires the humility to scrap the first draft of your character and the commitment to refine the next. Wisdom isn't in that first knee-jerk emotional reaction. It's found in the reasoned, rewritten choice that comes after the philosophical exercise.
And this daily diligence is what separates a true, stable provision from just, aimless activity. This brings us to a key critique of modern life, which so often rewards just sheer speed over strategy. Seth Godin has a great term for this. He calls it the non-strategy of take what you can get. Just hustling for attention, playing it safe by following the crowd, and prioritizing busyness over purposeful action.
It's the philosophy of perpetual motion without a destination. And we see millions of people executing on this non-strategy every single day. They confuse activity with productivity. They're doing the ascusis, they are training, but they're doing the wrong reps. They're focused on external validation, not internal alignment.
I think we all recognize that pattern in ourselves sometimes. Everyone is busy, everyone is running fast, but where are they actually going? The sources have that fantastic speedometer metaphor. The number on your car speedometer doesn't tell you how fast you're getting to your destination. You might just be driving in circles really, really quickly.
And the conclusion is stark, but it's immediately applicable. Direction matters infinitely more than speed. Most people in the hustle culture are, in fact, going nowhere fast. Or worse, they're accelerating away from their stated goals because they haven't stopped to establish a philosophical direction. So wisdom, as provision, that's your compass. It provides the strategy so that every rep, every day of effort actually moves you toward inner certainty, rather than just spinning your wheels chasing temporary gains.
And once you have that internal direction, obstacles will come up. They inevitably arise. Because life is messy and a lot of things are not up to us. And so wisdom guides us not to abandon the journey, but to adapt our technique.
This is where we bring in the wisdom of Confucius, which fits perfectly with his Stoic approach. He said, when it's obvious the goal can't be reached through your current methods, don't adjust the goal, adjust the action steps. The goal makings were provisions achieving inner sovereignty, living a virtuous life that stays constant. That destination is fixed. But the map, the route, the action steps, they have to be adaptable.
That's a tough lesson to apply, though, especially when we've invested months or years into a particular plan, a business strategy, a relationship approach. Admitting the action steps aren't working takes some courage.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
It requires two virtues that feel almost contradictory, but they're essential. Humility and persistence. You need the humility to admit the strategy you've been using for 6 months isn't working, to admit your first draft is flawed. You have to recognize the failure of the method, not the failure of the self.
And the persistence is what ensures you don't just quit the whole thing. You don't quit the goal of wisdom just because the current path is blocked.
Precisely. You have to be persistent enough to keep doing the philosophical work, but humble enough to recognize when that work needs to change course.
Yeah.
This whole practice is about constantly refining both the inner self and the outer strategy to make sure they're aligned. It's the wisdom provision guiding your effort, maximizing the certainty that your speed is actually moving you in the right direction.
That focus on self-conquest and inner sovereignty, it sounds demanding, almost solitary. But once that internal foundation is established, once you've started conquering yourself and found your direction, the wisdom naturally turns outward. It can't just stay self-focused. The source is identify this fundamental principle for the next phase. Our prime purpose in life is to help others. And if you can't help them, at least don't hurt them.
This transition from inner work to outer service is the critical next step, and it's strategic wisdom. Because when we prioritize living for others, we are building a provision, a legacy, a reputation, a sense of meaning that cannot be taken away by external forces. As the sources remind us, only a life lived for others is worth living. If your provision is built on service and generosity, it's protected from the kind of loss that plagues material things. When you give wisely, you multiply your provision. You don't deplete it.
And part of that service starts with just managing our expectations of other people. If we expect perfection from the world, we're just setting ourselves up for daily disappointment and anger. Marcus Aurelius helps us navigate this messy human landscape in his Meditations. He reminds us that everyone is playing a role in the larger drama of existence, and crucially, that we're all working on the same big, messy project.
And that perspective is so liberating for your daily interactions. When you encounter people who are difficult, who obstruct progress, who gossip, who act selfishly, and you will encounter them, that's a guarantee. Understanding they're just playing their flawed, imperfect part helps you practice patience and tolerance instead of immediately jumping to indignation. Marcus Aurelius forces us to stop expecting the impossible. We stop expecting a world without flawed people.
So it's just accepting reality.
Exactly. He notes that if you look through history, every era has had liars and cheats and obstructions. Why should our time be any different? Accepting this is a huge aid to tranquility.
And the self-reflection point here is really powerful. The pressure shifts back onto us. We have to be grateful for the role we have in this drama and constantly make sure that our part isn't, what was the quote from Chrysippus?
Yes, that our role is not the bad line in the play put there for laughs. Our role should be meaningful, purposeful. We must choose to contribute value to this big, messy project.
And the role we choose to play leads right into the practice of grace and generosity. These are essential provisions for navigating social life. The poet Rupi Kaur explores grace not just as some, religious concept, but as a deliberate act, doing something for someone who doesn't deserve it.
That idea is so compelling because it requires an active decision. A decision to transcend that immediate urge for retribution or judgment or reciprocity. It requires the wisdom to look past the immediate perceived fault of the person.
But what's the strategic value of that? Why does an act of grace build up our provision?
Because in that act of undeserved generosity, something transformative happens inside you. It affects the recipient, of course. But it also affects the giver, who expands their own capacity for empathy and self-control. And it affects any witnesses who see a demonstration of applied wisdom. It literally changes the atmosphere of the entire drama you're in. The giver demonstrates that their peace is not conditional on the perfection of others, and that reinforces their own inner sovereignty.
It's a self-reinforcing provision. That's fascinating. And it's not always about these huge, grand gestures of grace. I love the quote from Jean de la Bruyere. Generosity lies less in giving much than in giving at the right moment. So strategic wisdom involves precise timing.
The timing is critical. Giving $10,000 to a millionaire is, it's less generous than offering the right word of support to a friend at the exact moment they need it. Giving at the right moment requires awareness, empathy, and the wisdom to see the true need, which might not be financial at all. It requires you to really see the person in the situation.
And we see a perfect modern example of this in the complex and fascinating case of President Jimmy Carter. The sources are clear that his presidency might be debated. It was certainly tumultuous. But the question of whether he was a great man who made wisdom his provision is, well, it's a lot easier to answer when you look at the long arc of his life.
His life after the presidency, which spans decades, is a masterclass in establishing inner sovereignty and turning it outward into relentless service. He didn't just retire to a quiet life of luxury. He actively dedicated himself to maximizing his potential through service. His whole philosophy, referencing the parable of talents, was that he had one life, and his major prayer was to live his life so that it will be meaningful.
Can you give some specifics? Because just saying service can be a bit abstract. What did his actions really demonstrate about wisdom as provision?
Carter's greatness was defined by what he did after all that external power was stripped away. When the prestige of the presidency was gone, what was left was his character and his commitment. He dedicated himself to global public health, disease eradication, election monitoring, often putting himself in incredibly dangerous parts of the world. And maybe most famously, Habitat for Humanity. He literally worked with his hands well into his 90s, building homes for the needy.
That level of engagement, especially in old age, it just proves his provision was entirely internal. His value wasn't contingent on the approval of Congress or the success of his policies. It was based on his commitment to deploying his wisdom for others.
It's the ultimate proof of inner provision. He built a legacy not on what he possessed in office, but on how he chose to live for decades after. And that kind of legacy is unassailable. It's immune to political shifts or economic crises. And ultimately, the sources bring the accountability right back to you, the listener. They remind us of what Isabel Wilkerson observed. We are responsible for our own ignorance or, with time and open-hearted enlightenment, our own wisdom. The choice of what to pack for the journey, ignorance or wisdom, is solely ours.
That leads perfectly into our final section, which is all about the long-term sustainability of this provision. It emphasizes balance, integrity, and this almost magical property of wisdom to multiply.
As we look at the entire journey, this lifelong practice, it demands balance. It demands moderation. This philosophical marathon is not a sprint. The sources explicitly warn us, moderation is key. Don't overdo anything. We have to sustain this effort over decades. That requires careful pacing, conserving our resources.
And that moderation is tied directly to preparation. The proactive, quiet work of packing our wisdom provision. The mindset has to be proactive, not reactive, right? The old maxim. The more you sweat in peace, the less you bleed in war.
Preparation is the quiet, steady packing of provision. It's doing the reps, refining the strategy, strengthening your character before the crisis hits. When an inevitable war arrives, financial loss, a health crisis, the death of a loved one, your provision is tested, and the outcome is determined by the work you did in the peace. If you haven't done that premeditation of evils, if you haven't refined your judgment, you will bleed internally from the shock.
That preparation doesn't have to be these grand, exhausting gestures every day, which is a relief. The sources remind us that profound change, that provision building, it can start small. One small positive thought can change a whole day.
Progress is made in small, incremental decisions that compound over time. The wisdom of moderation says we don't try to solve all our problems today. We don't deplete our mental energy trying to sprint the marathon of life. Instead, we focus on that one positive thought, that one correct judgment, that one instance of grace today. The accumulation of those small victories creates a vast provision.
And what's so fascinating here is the unique property of wisdom as a provision. Unlike any other resource we've talked about, gold, physical strength, it's the only resource that actually grows when you spend it.
This is so counterintuitive to our modern conditioning. We're taught scarcity. We're taught that if you spend something, you deplete it. If you spend time, you lose it. If you spend money, you have less. But the observation from Maya Angelou applies perfectly to wisdom. You can't use up creativity. The more you use, the more you have. Every time we exercise philosophical judgment, every time we choose patience over anger, every time we decide to help rather than hurt, we aren't spending our wisdom. We're expanding our reserve of it.
It's a self-reinforcing loop with massive returns over the long view. And you contrast that with those external supports again. Physical strength declines with age, wealth can be lost overnight, status evaporates, but wisdom just deepens and multiplies with age and application. The person who packs wisdom at 50 has a richer provision because they have more life experience to apply their judgment to.
And this multiplication property means that the philosophical work can truly begin at any point. The sources emphasize it is truly never too late to begin packing this provision. We look back at Marcus Aurelius going to Sextus as an old man. Seneca confirms that education is something we are doing for life, not for graduating. We are never too important or too successful or too old to challenge ourselves and learn what we do not yet know. If you are breathing, you have a provision to pack.
And this lifelong school, it prepares us for the inevitable tests. The points in the journey where our external props are ripped away. Sometimes the only way to prove the sufficiency of our inner provision is to experience profound difficulty. The sources talk about getting knocked down lower than we have ever been to stand back up taller than we ever were.
Those moments of total external loss or crisis, a bankruptcy, a diagnosis, a betrayal, they are the ultimate gauge of how well we have packed. If all your external props are stripped away, the quality of your internal response, the firmness of your character, your ability to maintain rational judgment, that's what proves whether your wisdom provision is sufficient. If you can stand back up taller, it means your foundation was internal, not external.
And finally, wisdom as provision includes a non-negotiable moral compass: integrity. This alignment between your private self and your public actions. True inner sovereignty requires this radical self-honesty about the path you're walking.
The very root of the word integrity means completeness, wholeness. When our public actions align with our private judgments, we are whole. When they diverge, we create internal conflict, which immediately fragments our sovereignty and leads to the very instability Epictetus warned us about.
It's a silent provision, isn't it? Integrity ensures you're not wasting mental energy trying to keep two different narratives straight. And the sources give us a profoundly practical integrity test for anyone trying to establish inner leadership. If you have to sneak to do it, lie to cover it up, or delete the evidence to avoid it being seen, you probably shouldn't be doing it.
And this test, it applies to every aspect of life, from minor bad habits to major moral compromises. Wisdom ensures that the path you walk is one you are proud to own, privately and publicly. Because compromising your integrity is the fastest way to lose the internal sovereignty you work so hard to establish. You're just sacrificing true provision for a temporary, shallow gain. So, what does this all mean for you listening right now? We started with the foundational wisdom of Diogenes Laertius, and through the teachings of Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius, Confucius, and others, we have identified this non-negotiable truth. Seeking security externally leads inexorably to agitation, to fear, and to instability. Your problems will follow you wherever you go until you address your internal choices.
But the alternative is certain. It's available to everyone, making wisdom our essential provision through relentless daily practice, through the humility to adjust our actions instead of our goals, through expansive service, through balance, through integrity. It ensures we carry the only support that becomes more reliable, more certain, and exponentially more powerful with every passing year.
Whether you are in the morning of life or its evening, whether you're in a season of peace or a season of war, the sources urge us to begin packing now. This commitment to self-conquest and continuous philosophical learning is the ultimate act of self-provision for the long journey ahead.
And we are left with a final provocative thought that brings us right back to the practice of living philosophy, not just talking about it. The sources discuss Lao Tzu's paradox: those who know do not speak. Those who speak do not know. So if wisdom is something that is lived and demonstrated more than it is discussed or articulated, then the ultimate test of your provision isn't what philosophical theory you can quote or how eloquently you can argue. The ultimate test is what philosophical choice you make when you choose to remain silent, when you choose restraint or patience or grace without ever needing to explain or justify yourself to anyone else. That is the true, unstealable proof of the provision you have packed.